All right, it's been 3.5 years, but Volume 1 just dropped for the last season of one of the best shows of the past decade. But it is season 5 of a TV show, so does it actually feel like they're building towards something incredible here? Or is it starting to feel like they are just running out of ideas? Well, let's talk about Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1. What is up, everyone? Welcome to Mad Blood. Now, first of all, let me know down in the comments down below if you've seen Stranger Things Season 5, Volume 1. What did you think about it? Are you enjoying it so far? Are you enjoying the direction that the final season is going? Are you not? Let me know. And just a heads up as well, guys, as we go through Volume 1 and all the things I think it did well and all the things I think it's not doing so well, this will be all spoiler-free. And yeah, the final season of Stranger Things is here. I mean, that's kind of crazy to think about, right? I mean, the first season came out in 2016, which literally seems like it was a lifetime ago. I mean, for me, neither of my kids were born yet. I mean, even for these characters, these actors, I mean, some of them now in season 5 are completely different, which, speaking of, is really tough for a show like this. I mean, sometimes when you have child actors who are great, who are 8 or 9 years old, sometimes they're not so great when they grow up, when they're 17, 18 years old or whatever have you. But I mean, it's pretty impressive how they've been able to just maintain the hype of this show over the years, the popularity, people still invested in these characters, even though a lot of them are completely different as this show has gone along. Yeah, I mean, hats off to everybody on the team, because that's obviously a very, very hard thing to do. And for me, I've always been a fan of Stranger Things ever since season 1. And yeah, at times this show can definitely feel like a bit of a caricature type of a view of the decade of the 80s, just because everything at times is so punchy and so bright and so pop music kind of feeling. But for me, this show has always given me a lot of nostalgia, which I'm sure it does for a lot of you. I mean, that's definitely been a niche for this show. Just the clothes, the toys, the cars, the bikes, the lifestyle of that decade that a lot of us miss, even though me personally, I didn't experience a ton of the 80s, but I did experience a bit of it. But there was still a lot of the 80s stuff carry over into the 90s as well. But yeah, I've always enjoyed kind of the aesthetic of this show, the angle that they go with this show, the inspiration they've taken from other shows and other movies has always been something that's fun for me. And like I said, yeah, it has definitely created a niche for this show and has inspired so many other movies and TV shows to go this 80s route, which, yeah, has been fun. Some movies and shows not so good, in large part because of Stranger Things. It's been pretty cool to see like a resurgence for the 80s just as a decade, the clothes becoming cool again, the cars becoming cool, all of that. And yeah, a lot of that has to do with Stranger Things, which, like I said, is pretty damn cool. But really, most of all, I think Ross and Matt Duffer, the writers, and the rest of the people involved in the production have done a pretty great job of blending a lot of the other great movies and TV shows that have inspired Stranger Things. Stuff like E.T., Alien, Carrie, Stand By Me, Star Wars, Jaws, Elm Street, Ghostbusters, all great movies. I think they've done a good job of blending some of those things throughout every single season, tipping their cap, a lot of homages, whether on the nose or whether not. But I think also a good job of taking that and kind of, making it their own. And yeah, at times with Stranger Things, it does feel like a little bit of a ripoff of some of those other great movies and great TV shows like I just mentioned a second ago, but overall, still really, really fun. And something I have to mention about Stranger Things too, especially in an era nowadays where all of the popular IPs and movies and TV shows and franchises seem like they are just getting bled to death and absolutely squeezed dry until we are basically sick of them. It's really cool that Stranger Things, every single time they release a new season, obviously we've only had 5 so far, but it's an event. It is a big deal. They give us enough time in between them to really want it and miss the show and miss these characters, which is really damn cool and fun. And like I said, something we just don't get enough of nowadays. And also what I respect about Stranger Things as all of the seasons have gone along, I do think they've done a pretty good job of keeping quite a bit of cohesion between the different seasons. Obviously, we're only in season 5. It's not like they've had 10 or 20 seasons or anything like that, but I still think they've done a good job of always looking ahead with their writing, with their story choices, and that way they can kind of tie things back to the foundation of the show, especially in season 1. You know, there's not a lot of seasons in Stranger Things that I feel like are like very disconnected or don't feel like they have a lot of cohesion with the rest of the seasons and the overall story. I do think they've just done a good job of always kind of tying things back to the original seasons, the original characters. Like, I feel like, yes, as the seasons have gone along, they've tried to push the story forward and implement some new things, of course, but always keeping that cohesion with the characters, with the main foundation of this franchise, which, yeah, has been great to me. All right, enough of all that. Let's get into Volume 1. And again, this will be spoiler free. I'm sure after the series finale, I'll have like a full spoiler video on the final season, but let's now get into the 4 chapters in Volume 1. All right, of course, let's start off by talking about the season premiere episode called Chapter 1, The Crawl. And as soon as I'm watching this premiere episode, it is just like, man, clearly this final season has basically a blank check. They can pretty much do anything they want, have any resources that they want. Obviously, the show has had a big budget for a very long time, but especially in this final season, and kicking things off here with this episode, The Crawl, it really feels like, man, these guys have every single resource they could possibly want to try to pull off this final season. And I think in this first episode, I really do think they do a pretty incredible job of making it really feel like something big is coming at the end of this season. Like, we are really building towards something. This is going to be massive and epic. And there's also like a big wake and a lot of wounds after what happened in season 4, because obviously Hawkins after season 4 changed forever. A lot of things for the characters changed forever. Just a lot of differences and wounds and deaths and other things that these characters have had to overcome, and they're going to have to overcome in this season, but also at the same time doing a great job of still giving us a sprinkle of what people really fell in love with in season 1. You know, some of the coming of age stuff, the high school life, just life in the 80s for a lot of these characters, you know, kind of balancing those two things. I think they're doing a good job of that early on in the first episode. And of course, what's also important when you kick off a new season is kind of what are our characters up to after all the craziness, like I just mentioned at the end of season 4, Hawkins essentially splitting in half, people fleeing town, this city now being in a totally different state, changing forever. They have to kick off in this first episode with a little bit of information of like, all right, so what are our characters up to now? And I do think that journey in this episode is fun. It shows us like where some of the characters are working now, what they're kind of doing to piece together kind of the broken pieces of Hawkins after everything that happened in season 4. And also we're seeing a lot of just like, especially from Dustin, the massive wounds still being there with everything that went down with the Hellfire Club. Like I said, especially with Dustin's character. And I think they do a good job with that journey in this opening episode. And again, of course, it's episode 1 of a brand new season. So there's gonna be some things that you need to do here that make it feel like it's a bit of a mini season finale to really hook people into the rest of this season. Because if you don't, you know, a lot of people will drop the show if it's just starting to feel like not quite what they expected. And we know the season is gonna have a massive finale. There's gonna be a lot of big things that happen. But here, I think they do a good job in this first episode of making it still feel like, all right, we know something is coming many hours later in this season, but we're still going to get something pretty big here at the end of episode 1. And again, I mentioned as this episode was just kind of starting out, it was already starting to feel like, man, Netflix really did give them a blank check. And I think at the end of this first episode, it is pretty big. It's a pretty decent hook into episode 2. I don't feel like it's anything mind-blowing or anything like that, but I think it gets the job done enough for me. It's a moment at the end of chapter 1 that puts some key characters in a lot of danger in a location that we're very familiar with, which is fun. And at the very end of this episode, at the very least, if you don't really think that anyone is probably gonna die per se or anything like that, I think it still sets up at the very least in episode 2 a pretty big sequence that I know is coming and I know is going to be pretty damn fun. All right, next let's talk about chapter 2, the vanishing of Holly Wheeler. And as the early stages of this episode, after the big hook at the end of episode 1, I'm just kind of thinking to myself, as these characters are desperately trying to rush to this place where a lot of the other important characters are in a lot of danger, why don't some of these kids or more of these kids have a car by now? It's just kind of like, okay, so we can supply them with whatever goodies they want from an arms dealer for characters like Hopper and some of the other characters, but we don't have the resources to give these kids like a Jeep or something to, just get around a little bit quicker when shit really hits the fan. And I mean, I get it. You want to show more of the bike stuff, and these kids probably just enjoy riding their bikes, and it helps them to get through some of the places that a car couldn't get to. But yeah, maybe just a car, just in case. Now, as everything is going down in episode 2, I am really starting to have some major issues with just the creative choices with the Demogorgons in particular. I mean, and we're seeing a lot of that in this episode, and I have a lot of issues with it. I'll talk about this a little bit more as we get into episode 4, because we start to see even more of that. But I'm already starting to feel like the Demogorgons and what they're doing creatively with these characters is really starting to get sloppy as hell. I'm just kind of asking myself, okay, are these things powerful and scary, or are they not? What are we doing here? Now, also, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I was really hoping in season 5 they would start to kind of slide Will Byers' character a little bit more to the side. Not kick him off the show or necessarily do anything like that, but kind of slide him a little to the side, because I was starting to feel like in season 4, he's probably the worst actor out of the friend group. Some of his acting I felt like was pretty distracting for me, and that just was definitely a miss for me in season 4, but early on, especially as episode 1 and episode 2 go on, I'm starting to feel like, all right, Will is probably actually going to be opposite in this season. Will is going to be a massive part of the story as this season goes along, kind of tying things back to the events, his disappearance in season 1 a bit. We're going to start getting some reveals with that, some more information probably with that. So I'm kind of like, damn it. I was really hoping, like I said, they would kind of push Will a little bit to the side, give some of the other characters more screen time, but it's going the opposite direction clearly, and I'm not 100% sure how I feel about that. And now with that said, a huge part of this episode is the demos, is Vecna, and a big part of it is something similar to Will's disappearance in season 1. Obviously, the name of this episode kind of tells you what goes down with Holly, so we've got a new kid that's disappeared. But there's some big questions with this episode. It's kind of like, why? What is their intentions with this kid? What is really all going down here? And to me, I feel like those questions are something that keep me invested in the rest of this story and make me want to stick around to find out what is really all going down here. Plus, on top of that, I know we do this a lot in this show, but I do enjoy that journey of watching these characters try to piece together these clues to figure out what is really going on. And also in this episode, you can clearly tell, man, as this season finale gets closer, series finale really just gets closer and closer, and everything kind of culminates here. Tensions are only going to continue to build. Stress is only going to continue to build. And we're starting to see our characters are starting to fight here, Some of that tension is bleeding into their relationships together. But now with that said, I know it's coming. There's going to be this big oh man, I actually love you, man. I'm so sorry for what I did. And I know it's coming. I know it's going to be cheesy. I'm not necessarily going to love it or anything like that, but I know it's coming, and I'm trying to prepare myself to not hate it. Now, this was just a little something that I needed to point out in this episode that for me personally, I really enjoyed, because Halloween 2, the original from 1981, is one of my favorite slasher movies, probably one of my favorite horror movies ever made. So when they're at the Hawkins Memorial Hospital, I thought it was pretty cool that we got a little homage to the original Halloween 2 with the logo there. Also, at the end of the episode, Mr. Sandman plays. Another homage there to Halloween 2, I would imagine. But yeah, just for me personally, I kind of love that. I will say though, with this episode, I do think there are some moments here where it gets a little too technical. I get this is a TV show, this isn't a movie, so they do need to fill some time. They need to come up with some areas and some new creative choices to kind of push this story along, but in kind of a slower pace kind of a way. But I just think we spend too much time here talking about decibels and trying to fix radio signals. I just think they should have toned that down just a little bit. It kind of felt like those moments in high school where you're in a particular class, maybe something exciting happens in class, but you always get to that moment in time where the teacher has to talk about the nitty-gritty, the stuff that you have to talk about in order to graduate, and everybody in class starts falling asleep during that point in time. And I feel like there's some stuff in this episode where it's like, all right, guys, enough. I get we probably need to talk about this stuff because of the direction you go with the episode and tracking some of these characters down and navigating throughout the Upside Down and some of the other areas. I guess we need to talk about it, but I guess it would have been toned down a little bit or just talked about maybe a little faster. I don't know, but it just gets a little too technical for me in this episode. But damn it though, I do have to mention anytime we are in the Upside Down, and we're in the Upside Down in this episode quite a bit, I really do love it. I think it looks great. Yes, a lot of it, of course, is very, very, very digital, but it just has that dark, apocalyptic type of a feel that has always worked for me in this show. I think anytime we're in the Upside Down, that's a moment in time. I'm usually pretty invested in the moment in the show. Plus, you know, it's also bonus points that it's clearly inspired by one of my favorite sci-fi horror movies ever made, the original Alien. A lot of this stuff from Alien and Aliens, which is great as well. But the Upside Down, a lot of fun, and we get a good amount of that in this episode. Now, at the end of this episode, we do get some big information of who and what is really behind the disappearance of this kid, and maybe a little bit of information as to why and what is really going down here. But I guess with this big reveal, I guess you could say, I'm sure some people out there might say, nah, it wasn't really a reveal because it was so predictable. But for me, I felt like they tried to make it feel like a reveal, but it just kind of felt very anticlimactic to me. I was just kind of watching that and I was like, okay, I feel like we've been there, done that. I mean, the big dramatic music drops and then the reveal happens and it's just like, whoa, and my face is just sitting there like, so? Overall though, a beautifully shot episode with some great atmosphere at times, but I mean, it's a second episode, and it definitely felt like a second episode. You know, it was fun, yeah, because I'm a big fan of the show, and I just eat this stuff up, really whatever they give us, but it definitely didn't really hit for me like the first episode did. All right, now let's get into Chapter 3, called The Turnbow Trap. Now, I want to say this right off the bat with this episode because especially this episode, it really feels like virtually everything in this episode is on a stage with blue screen and green screen work. I mean, it looks pretty damn good because, again, unlimited resources, but it just feels so fake and so disconnected from the more grounded approach to the show that they took, especially in season 1. And of course, we are 5 seasons into this show, so eventually it was going to come a point in time where they were going to have to push to the side, hanging out at the mall, hanging out at school, having Eggos with our family in the morning for breakfast. That stuff was going to kind of get pushed to the side, and we were going to spend more and more time in the more supernatural, upside down, dimensional travel type of stuff. Was just going to become more of this show as season 5 went along, of course, because these characters at this point are now like, all right, guys, enough messing around. Like, we actually have to try and stop all of this. And again, it does look dark and eerie and pretty damn cool at times, but I just kind of am feeling like there's just too much that is just becoming so fake. At times, it really just feels like our actors are just surrounded by nothing but CGI. The stuff that they're reacting to, the stuff that they're touching, you know, is clearly not actually there when they're acting. And I don't love that. I prefer it when shows, especially when they have a massive budget, are actually blowing stuff up and touching things, and we're building things. I love that. Whereas in this episode, like I said, a lot of this stuff just looks so fake. And I don't really love that. I wish they would have built more things. Now I get it's the Upside Down. Like, this stuff is pretty crazy, right? It's not like you can just build all this stuff on a whim. I get that aspect of it, but yeah, it just feels like we're watching a couple actors standing on a stage behind a green screen for virtually this entire episode. But now with that said, there is some solid mystery in this episode as well. I feel like we're really starting to kind of peel back what the military's intentions are here in town. You know, what's going on with this new military base that's also here? You know, what is up with this giant Game of Thrones wall that they have introduced? And I think some of that mystery is fun for me. But also what's key about that is, yeah, we're getting some information, but it's not too much. They're still maintaining that mystery and that ambiguity, which I think is done pretty well. Now, with that said, I remember as I was watching this episode, I was kind of thinking, man, it's all about Vecna. It's just Vecna, 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 Vecna. Like everybody's just talking about Vecna nonstop. And I get Vecna is a big part of the story, obviously, but I am starting to feel like, man, the villain side of this story, the bad guy side of this whole thing is really starting to feel pretty one-dimensional to me. Like, I kind of feel like let's involve some more Demogorgons, maybe involve some more like minions of Vecna, some more things we haven't seen before. I feel like it's just kind of like, all right, these characters are clearly stepping into territories they've never really been before. Their backs are against the wall and they're having to do things they've never been before. So let's maybe introduce some new villains that they've never ran into before. They're kind of unleashed in these new territories, in these new areas. They're pushing certain buttons with Vecna, which then unleashes some more characters. I think that would be pretty fun, and that's something that's starting to feel like a miss for me in this episode. Obviously, they might do that as the season goes along, of course, but thus far, it's just kind of like, Vecna. Hey, you guys heard about Vecna? There's this guy, Vecna. Yeah. It's like, we get it. Vecna is a big deal. And yeah, thus far, they try to implement some new, I guess you could say, villains along the way, but it's not all that effective. I don't really find myself hating those people or those characters or those things all that much, really. You know, in the end, there's really only one thing that seems scary and mean and something you really want to get revenge on, which is just Vecna and Vecna. You guys heard about this guy named Vecna? Okay, that's the last time I'm going to say Vecna. Well, at least for now. But of course, we all know when you need some shit done in Stranger Things, who do you call? You don't call Ghostbusters. You call Erica Sinclair. Like, you guys should have done that 2 episodes ago. And I know it's kind of tropey, especially in the horror genre when you're trying to take down some beast or some unstoppable being. But regardless of that, I do love me some traps. And I do enjoy watching characters that I like set up those traps and kind of prepare for that big battle. And of course, like the title of this episode tells you, there is going to be a big trap, kind of like Nancy in Elm Street preparing for Freddy Krueger, or Kevin McAllister preparing for the wet bandits in Home Alone. And that's something that I do enjoy, like I said, and I do just want to find out, like, all right, how is this all going to go down? Are the traps going to work? And that's just something I find good anticipation in, and I think they do a good job of that. Now, with that said, the big fight that we were building towards with these traps, with all this anticipation, in the end, I kind of felt like it was just meh. To be honest, the CGI I felt like was pretty iffy. And again, it just felt like they were fighting something that's not actually there, which can be pulled off at times. But in this instance, yeah, I just didn't think the fight was very good at all. And really, I feel like just in general, digital effects are really great at adding things to environments, to cities, to landscapes, to creating an immersive environment, things in the background, whatever have you. But I feel like even in 2025, when you have to make a creature or make a person do anything that's really like up front in bright lights and they have to move around and things like that, I feel like that technology just isn't quite there yet for me. I mean, yeah, overall, this entire sequence of how this whole trap scene goes down, yeah, is pretty fun, but this is a review, so I'm gonna nitpick it a little bit, and the digital effects, especially in the fight sequence and the intensity of it, I just don't think it was great. Now, with that said, though, I do think this episode does end on a pretty decent cliffhanger. It's a character that had been kind of pushed to the side. Maybe you forgot about a little bit. They reintroduced them a little bit here at the end of this episode. And it is a character that I do enjoy, so I look forward to seeing that character get some more screen time in the next episode. Overall, though, I do think Chapter 3 is a fun episode. Way too much CGI, though, but yeah. fun nonetheless. All right, now let's talk about the last episode in Volume 1, which is Chapter 4, called Sorcerer. And I feel like in this episode, this might be the most action-packed episode we've possibly ever seen in this entire show up until this point. I feel like there are several moments in this episode that are kind of layered on top of each other where all of the characters are in some sort of crazy danger. And also, it's bad enough as I'm watching it, I'm just kind of like, I don't know how they're gonna get out of this situation alive, but I'm here for it. And I do think those scenes in particular, the big action sequences, are not only intense, but I do think they're also just pulled off overall really damn well. And also on top of that, there are some moments in this 4th episode that really have some like slasher type gore, which I'm a pretty big fan of course, but also on top of that, it was pretty surprising to me. I was like, all right, damn, Stranger Things, we're going there. But now with that said, to me, there are some pretty big flaws and some pretty big plot holes in this episode. And just to kind of piggyback off of what I said earlier about the Demogorgons, I feel like early on in this show, they were just way more insanely dangerous to me. Yeah, vulnerable at times, of course, but most of all, and most importantly, it felt like they were just more consistent with what they were creatively supposed to be in the show. But as this season goes along, I feel like with the Demogorgons, they're just making them weaker and weaker and weaker. I mean, these things are being fought off or at least delayed by 50-plus-year-old moms. They're running away, it seems like, anytime things get a little bit dicey. And yes, I do think Demogorgons need to be a little bit vulnerable, but I think they're taking it too far. Then randomly after stuff like that, they just slaughter an entire squad of soldiers with assault rifles. And then literally minutes later, they're being fought off by children in just hand-to-hand combat. It's like, who is making these decisions? I feel like it is getting so sloppy. And we see that more and more and more in episode 4. I mean, come on. There is a point in this season where literally someone is keeping a Demogorgon at bay with a wine bottle. And then the next episode, there are 20 soldiers blasting this thing with assault rifles. And the Demogorgon barely even blinks. It's just like, what are we doing here, guys? And also on top of that, can we stop making these Demogorgons roar like every 5 seconds? It just feels odd to me every time they turn a corner, every time they see someone new, every time they literally do anything. It just seems like they just start roaring, you know, and it seems like it is an excuse to make it possible for our main characters that you don't want to kill off, giving them a chance to get away in that moment. Hey, let's just make these things constantly roar every 5 seconds so our characters are not actually vulnerable, which in fact, me as I'm watching the episode, makes it clearly obvious what you're doing here, and it just does not feel like these things are actually dangerous to me. Now, the thing I'm about to talk about isn't necessarily a bad thing or a sloppy decision that they make in this season. It's just something I thought was a little bit different with this season. I was like, oh, that's different. I'm not used to hearing that in Stranger Things. This is an actual line that goes down in episode 4. They say, "Did you finally hit Dick?" "Hit the dick." "All right, let's just hope it's not too hard." "Well, if it is, I'll soften it." It's just like, damn, Stranger Things, we really are growing up, aren't we? Now, with that said, there is a big action set piece in this episode, which I thought was pretty cool. It felt like just this massive, suffocating, chaotic battle, like something you'd see in The Last of Us or something you'd see in Game of Thrones or something. But I thought it was not only intense, I thought it was filmed pretty well also, and also surprisingly gory once again for Stranger Things. And of course, this is the end of this chunk of episodes, so I thought it was cool that this definitely felt like a mini season with a kind of mini season finale. Now, in the end, with episode 4, if you're expecting some crazy, massive, like heartbreaking or jaw-dropping type of a moment, I mean, just think about your favorite TV shows you have ever watched over the years. A lot of instances, they have like a big, jaw-dropping, fork-in-the-road type of a moment in those shows. Those moments where you say to yourself, man, I cannot believe they just did that. That was bold as hell. You're not really going to get that here, at least yet. But with that said, yes, there is a big reveal that happens at the end of episode 4. I'm sure a lot of you already saw this coming. I thought it was pretty good, and it definitely opens up some new possibilities for the rest of the episodes, which is pretty cool. Again, I didn't think it was anything jaw-dropping or all that crazy or unique, but overall, pretty fun. And not to spoil anything, but it also makes the potential battles that we're going to see in the upcoming episodes like a little bit more realistic and have a little bit more stakes with it. It also just adds a little bit of variety instead of like, oh, here's our protagonist, here's Vecna, and all right, guys, go at it. It's just like this never-ending story to take down Vecna. I feel like with the reveal at the end of this episode, it just adds a little variety to that, which is nice. But anyways, guys, in the end, I am having fun with season 5. I mean, I enjoy this show just in general. Yes, in its entirety, I enjoy every season in Stranger Things, but it does ebb and flow with how good it is. But overall, the show is always a lot of fun for me. The 80s aesthetic, the humor, the characters, the fun moments, the fun town of Hawkins is a lot of fun. And of course, it's there in this. We get some great creepiness with the Upside Down in season 5 thus far, which I think is a lot of fun. But yes, again, I think the decisions they are making with the Demogorgons is absolutely terrible and stupid. I don't know what the hell they're doing. And I don't really love that it feels like 50% of these episodes are on a stage with a green screen and everything is completely fake. I just love it when they're able to build these sets and build these characters and use more practical effects, even with the monsters, and our characters are actually able to act with something that is actually really scary. And it's not just like a dude in some sort of a suit with a bunch of balls all over him and things. And again, I do think some of the creative choices and the story choices thus far in season 5 are pretty generic, but of course, I mean, probably the best is yet to come. Obviously, we have some massive moments yet to come in this show. I'm really looking forward to seeing who's going to survive, who's not, what's going to happen to Hawkins, what's going to happen to some of these characters that we have literally watched grow up before our eyes. Thus far, a season definitely with a lot of flaws, obviously a blank check, like I said. So this season is just going to be a massive spectacle at the very least, even if the story choices and the reveals aren't all that great, because ending a show like this, a show that is so popular, creating an ending that the majority of your fans are going to love is pretty much impossible. So I recommend you guys have your bar set a little bit low and really just enjoy the moments that we get with these characters, the laughs, the epic set pieces, the moments we get inside of the Upside Down and all that stuff, the fight sequences, the more gore as well, which has been pretty interesting to see. But regardless, guys, thanks so much for watching my Season 5 Volume 1 review thus far. Again, let me know down in the comments down below what you think about Season 5 thus far. If you want some more videos from me right now, go ahead and check out some of these videos next to me. If you don't want to miss future videos on the channel, the best way to do that is to make sure you subscribe. All of my social media links are down below in the description, Instagram, stuff like that, if you want to follow me over there. But again, everybody, thanks so much for watching. My name is Matt, and I will talk to you in the next one.